Welcome back to another adventure with Exploring with Em and Stu.
And today we are here in Suffolk, where we're going to be continuing our quest for the World War II defences. So you may have been following our videos where we've been travelling up the Suffolk coast in the search for these anti-invasion defences. And we actually finished our last video just down south in Lowestoft. And we're carrying on along the coast to an area called Gunton Warren, which is just between Lowestoft and Gunton. And we've actually got some fantastic examples of some of these anti-invasion defences scattered all along the area here. So we're going to take you for a look and see what we can find. It's May 1940. Germany has already invaded Poland, France and the home countries, and next an invasion on Great Britain seemed inevitable. And what would quickly follow would be the largest scheme of military defences the country had ever seen. General Edmund Ironside was made Commander-in-Chief of Home Forces, and his job would be to try and come up with a plan to try and defend all the coastlines of Great Britain. But with British troops having been defeated in France and evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk, leaving most of their weapons behind, at the time his options were very limited.
The only resources available to him were a few undertrained and badly equipped forces. The task of preventing enemy troops and tanks from landing on the beaches and being able to just roam around the countryside, creating panic like had already happened in Western Europe, seemed a bleak one.
So he was limited to having to design static defences which could be manned by troops with limited training and weapons.
Until a time when his units were better equipped and trained well enough to be able to provide a mobile counterattack against any invading enemies, which was preferable.
And his strategy would be to come up with a series of stop lines, the first being along any vulnerable coastlines to try and stop them getting into the country to start with.
This not only included the beaches, but any rivers or estuaries where enemies could easily gain entry into the country, and this became known as the Coastal Crust.
But this wasn't his only plan of defence, because if the Coastal Crust had failed, then invaders would be met with an additional line of stop lines that would have crisscrossed the whole country.
And their job would be to stop the enemies reaching London or the industrial Midlands, and these were connected by nodal points, which were fortified towns, villages, or areas where there was an important crossroad that needed extra protection.
Now you've got to remember that these static defences were really only supposed to slow down the enemy, of course, until reinforcements could arrive. Now, of course, these static defences were not really ideal, were they?
No, not at all.
No, they were actually quite an old-fashioned way of doing things, probably from Ironside's sort of work that he did over in World War I in the trenches and that.
Well, the idea was quite simple, wasn't it? Build a fort and defend it.
Yeah.
That's basically what it was.
The same as they sort of did with the trenches, I suppose. I mean, this guy was in his 60s.
Yeah.
You know, Ironside, when he was actually appointed the Commander-in-Chief of Home Forces. But he did his best, obviously, because we left everything just about that we had.
Limited resources.
In Dunkirk, didn't we, of course? But Churchill wasn't really very happy with him, and actually he did replace him only after like 2 or 3 months with Lieutenant General
Alan Brooke. That's it.
Of course, he had much better chance because all of our weapons and that had been replenished a few months later, so he could come up with a much better plan, of course.
That's it.
But anyway, you don't really need free guesses as to why this coastline, of course, is vulnerable with its shallow beaches and cliffs. I mean, it really is absolutely littered with defences. And in fact, there's not too many of them missing, really. So we're going to get to showing you a little bit of what's left here and telling you why it was built and how it worked. So let's get going and we'll see what we can find first.
Let's go and have a look.
Now, before we actually get to showing you the remains that actually are left, we should probably mention that this was actually only a fraction of the defences that were constructed here, because any invaders that would have been landing on the beaches here first would have been met with the high beach scaffolding which covered a lot of the Suffolk coast. And here, behind that, there would have been a huge row of massive anti-tank blocks that they obviously would have struggled to get past. That certainly would have slowed them down. And that's if they had actually managed to get anywhere near the beach to start with, because of course, littered the sea out there, the sea would have had sea mines, and of course the RAF would have been bombarding them with their planes, and of course the Navy hopefully would have also been bombarding them with their guns. So the chances of them actually being able to get onto the beach, you would assume and hope, would be quite slim. And of course, in addition, they would have had our troops firing at them from the cliffs there, from numerous pillboxes and anti-tank guns that would have been set all along there. And it's some of these that we're hoping to take you for a little look at now.
And we're just walking up the side of this cliff with a magnificent view, shall I say, today. It's a lovely day, and we're at our first pillbox on this video.
That's it. Now, if you're not local to Suffolk or you've not visited the area very much, then you might not have actually seen one of these types of pillboxes before, because they're actually unique really just to Suffolk. They're actually a variant of the common type 26 that we often see, but these ones are larger and they've got twice as many loopholes. And like I said, we see them a lot in Suffolk, but nowhere else. And that's why they were kind of nicknamed the Suffolk Square. But we're lucky to have 8 of these still remaining in some shape or form. So we're going to take you for a little look at as many of them as we can and share with you a little bit of the information that we can as we go along looking at them. And so here we have our Type 26 variant, and these were built by the 558th Field Company Royal Engineers, and like we said earlier, there was hundreds of these particular pillboxes built all along the coast of Suffolk. Their walls are about a foot thick, so they're only really bulletproof and of course not shell-proof, but despite being set up here on the cliff, obviously quite exposed, this one has actually fared quite well, as you can see. And we've got many more of these to show you, so we'll get on to the next one and tell you a little bit more information. So here we are at the next pillbox, and as you can see today, it sits in quite a stark contrast to the surroundings. But of course, when it was first built, it would have been camouflaged with paint or covered in camouflage netting to make it less visible to any enemies that could have been trying to invade on the beaches and wondering where the gunfire was coming from.
And here we are at a broken pillbox, if you like.
And that's it. Now, these pillboxes weren't used until the end of the war. In fact, a lot of them were only really used for maybe a year or so, or their intention was to be used anyway. And so after the initial threat of invasion sort of subsided, a lot of them actually got used for other purposes. And as you can clearly see, this one is in bits. And there's 2 theories as to why this one is in fact in bits. Now, it could be because the Royal Engineers were actually practicing, weren't they, how they were going to get rid of these things when they were no longer needed, and they blew them up. The other theory is that in fact some of them were actually used to practice for the D-Day landings, of course, when our troops were going to go over to France and have to find a way to blow up those massive German gun emplacements and defences. And they practiced on some of the redundant pillboxes along the British coastline, and of course that's very likely what this was actually used for. I mean, they had a bit of a go, didn't they, at doing it, but a lot of people think it's just fallen down, but obviously not. It takes a little bit more than a bit of wind and rain to knock these things down.
That's it, exactly. So we're going to now go on to our next bit. So come along with us and we'll see what else we can find up here.
So we're just leaving that blown up pillbox behind us, and we've actually got something a bit different to show you, because there was 1 or 2 anti-aircraft gun emplacements up here. We've actually got one to show you now. So we're going to take you for a little look and I will tell you a bit about it. And here we have it. the remains of this light anti-aircraft gun, and this is actually known as a Bofors gun emplacement, this particular one. It was a 40mm light anti-aircraft gun, very likely would have been fixed to the floor, and these particular guns could be mobile or they could be fixed if they had their own gun emplacement to be housed in. Of course, this particular one was. There's not much left to see, but we'll show you a little bit what we can. Like we said, the gun would have been down there in the middle, and it's surrounded quite crudely by these little ammunition lockers, basically. No doubt there was probably somewhere else where they kept the main ammunition in something a little bit more protected, but expense magazines were for sort of quick loading of those guns, and they were of course supposed to be looking for any aircrafts that would have been, well, they would have been told where these aircrafts were coming in, and they would have aimed and hopefully fired at them. But like I said, these are actually fairly common. We've been to one or two before. Sadly, this one isn't in the best of condition. Would have likely have had a little crew house, but that's, well, if it is here, it's crumbled to bits. But it's nice to see something just a little bit different for you. But we need to get back to look at some more of these pillboxes now. So we're going to head off down the cliff and see what we can find. So I'm going to bring you down the cliff to have a look at yet another one of these pillboxes while Stu stays up there and has a little bit of a break. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So here we are. As you can see, it's identical to the last ones that we've looked at, well, other than the one that was blown up. And this one's obviously sunken a little bit into the sand over the decades. Now you've got to remember, of course, that they would not only have been sat here on the cliff, but they would have likely have been connected by trench systems so that they could have sort of run from one of them to the other. We've got one just over here, which we're trying to take you for a look at. And of course, these were actually quite vulnerable from certain weapons, particularly flamethrowers. So they would have often have been sort of surrounded by barbed wire, because of course, if you had somebody coming at you with a flamethrower, you didn't want them to get too close, because if you're one of the 8 guys that would have been inside them, you're likely going to get boiled alive. But we're only going to take you for a quick look at this one. Sadly, we can't get in it. As you can see, the blast wall just there is sort of filled with all sort of detritus and things. But we said we'd take you for a little look at all of them. So there we go. So the next one we're going to take you a look at is just over here. So fingers crossed, I might even be able to take you inside that one. So as promised, I'm actually going to take you for a look in one of these pillboxes, and we've actually chosen the one that's probably the cleanest one that we can actually get into, and I'll see if I can point out a few little features when I get in there. And here we are inside the pillbox. Not an awful lot to see, but I've certainly got a lot to tell you, so I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. But as you can see, this wouldn't have been quite as small as this back in the day. It's full up with sand and all sort of detritus. But let's have a look at the construction first. So this is just reinforced concrete, of course. And if you look on the roof, you can actually see how they would have made it look. It would have been wooden slattering, and if you look really closely, you can just about see the witness marks from the actual wood that they would have used for a mould. And we've got 6 loopholes in here, 2 on each side, as well as a little shelf down the bottom here where they would have had their Lee Enfield rifles, brain guns, whatever they could really get their hands on. Especially the Home Guard, of course, in the early days when they didn't really have very many weapons. But you may have noticed, look, that some of these loopholes have actually been blocked up. And that is in fact been done on purpose, because a little bit later in the war, probably 41, 42, they decided to update some of these. And they decided that some of the ways that they'd been built wasn't overly practical. Of course, the more loopholes, the more exposed the people are inside. And there would have been 8 guys in these, ideally, if they had 8 guys.
But the ones they did keep open, we'll have a little look out, because if you look really closely, you can just about see the pillbox that we went to look at before. A bit overgrown now, but these pillboxes were supposed to cover each other. So the guys with their rifles in this one would have been overlooking the pillboxes either side, and it would have been the same with this. If we could have seen back in the day, you would have been able to see the other pillboxes on the other side. So there you go. But of course these would have ideally had standard troops in them originally, and back sort of towards the end of the war they actually entrusted the Home Guard so well, because their training was so good and their weapons were so good, that they actually entrusted them to take control of the anti-invasion defences. But there you go. I don't think there's much else that I can say. Believe it or not, this is the cleanest one that I could actually take you for a little look at. But still, these are all identical. There's no anti-ricochet wall or anything in the middle of any of them. They probably weren't overly used after around about 1942, 43 anyway, or intended to be used. So yeah, just left like this, I suppose. But right, let's get you out and we'll find Stu.
Emma's just left the pillbox just a bit further back. You can see it actually just peeking over the
Yeah, because most of these pillboxes actually, they do cover each other, like I said, inside that. So one pillbox, you can often see the other one from it. That's how the defensive line was meant to work.
Exactly. And now we are just approaching yet another pillbox. Now, this one that I've just turned around very abruptly, and I do apologise for that, is full of rubbish. Literally, it's up to the loopholes there. It's full of rubbish. We can't get in this one. It's just been set alight and everything.
It's not the best.
This one, again, literally, if we look just beyond up there, the other pillbox, you can see it looking upon this. And then this one should, if we just come round here, should be able to see yet another one that's actually buried just over in this area here. So you can sort of clearly see the line, can't you?
Yeah, you can, yeah. They weren't all in a straight line either. They were sort of dotted back and forward, zigzagged almost, sort of across the cliffs here. Of course, they wanted the arc of fire to be able to cover an all-round field of view, really, and that's how they were supposed to work originally. Of course, they did adapt them a little bit over time, the ones that they decided to use. And just looking closely at this one around this side, they've also blocked up some of those loopholes. So maybe they did sort of update this a little bit. Possibly somebody's knocked the bits out. And if we look really closely just here, you can actually see a bit of damage to the eyes of this loophole. And I do wonder whether because we often see this had something to do with them practicing a little bit on them. I mean, I don't think this was necessarily done naturally. Do you, Stu? So
no, I don't, because it's quite routine. If you look, there's one there,
and nowhere else on the
and nowhere
pillbox.
else. It's just here.
Yeah.
So yes, I reckon it's a matter of routine. It's been done deliberately.
Yeah, through some sort of training.
Absolutely. But as I said, we can't get in this one because it is literally filled up to the brim of rubbish, and it really is. Yeah. But we are going to be moving on just down where you can see the lovely sun hitting the horizon over there. There is one that's just sunken, and we are going to be heading towards that one now. And there is a little bit of surprise at the end of the pillbox because they've got an unusual pillbox here.
There is, and there's something a little different to show you.
That's right.
Let's get down there.
See you in a minute.
Have a look.
Just leaving the pillbox that we was just at round the corner there. Now we're coming out to the open area where the sunken one, where I was just explaining. But if you look just up here, excuse the sunlight, this is where Emma done her little solo bit of explore. But there is another pillbox just round here. Now I don't know if you can actually see it. When we went up there was loads of people up there. We couldn't film up there. There wasn't loads to see, but you can just see the edge of this pillbox just on the top of the ridge, just up here. Now, obviously another strategy pillbox because this one can see this one and this one can see this one just here. And obviously that one is going to be able to see our sunken pillbox just along there. Walking to the open area, we're just on that open area I was just telling you about a minute ago. We're actually on our way to the sunken pillbox, which is just over on the left-hand side here. But in front of us is an anti-tank gun. That's what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, so this is a rather crudely made makeshift, probably quite an early one in the Second World War, anti-tank gun. We'll show you a little bit more when we get there, but we do believe these were probably one or two of these scattered around here. Like I said, when they were first sort of planning these anti-invasion defences, they really just sort of made whatever they sort of could.
Yeah.
Something we'll talk to you a little bit more about in a little while. But yeah, it's worth having a little look at. So when we get there, we'll show you one or two of its features. And here we come to our anti-tank gun along quite a nice little stream. And just in front of me here is our anti-tank gun emplacement, which many people probably just pass by and don't think too much of. Maybe they're more interested in this little stream. But if we look very closely, we can clearly see this is rather an old man-made structure. And if you look really closely, you can see it's actually constructed of what would have been Hessian bags that were filled with cement and just left to set, really. And they make a really strong foundation for this gun emplacement. And if I just take you for a little look into the middle of what is now sort of a little bit of a rudimental water feature, you can see the pedestal where the 6-pounder anti-tank gun would have been mounted. And if I look very closely, I can see there's clearly some sort of mounts along here. So we're probably talking about an enclosed gun house that would have been here, possibly steel or concrete, I should imagine. But yeah, it's an interesting little feature. And like I said, a lot of people just walk along here, more interested in the stream, and don't actually think that this is actually a World War II gun emplacement.
Just left the anti-tank gun, and now we're at the sunken pillbox. And as you can probably see just here, why we call it the sunken pillbox. But we already know that half of these pillboxes, once they started being installed, a few years down the line, not even that, they actually started crumbling away, didn't they?
Well, they did, yeah, because of course them being built along the coast, particularly the Suffolk coast, has got a lot of erosion. And I think within a year or two, not only the pillboxes, but gun emplacements, anti-tank blocks, started to either fall off the cliff, crumble away, sink into the sand.
Yeah.
And so some of them actually had to be sort of rebuilt, or like we believe this one has been, because it doesn't seem to have had any adaptations done to those loopholes. Maybe they just decided there was in fact enough of them along here, especially after sort of just a couple of years when they weren't really using these type of fixed defences anymore. They just sort of let it sink. And here it is. Needless to say, we're not going to get into this one.
No.
But we thought we'd better give you a little look anyway. And here we come to our next defence, and this, believe it or not, is actually another anti-tank gun. It would have had another 6-pounder anti-tank gun inside it, but as you can see, it's quite different to that rather rudimental one that we actually saw up there with the water coming out of it. Maybe this is a bit more of a permanent feature, so they made it a little bit later. But as you can see, big round concrete roof, where there's a pedestal in the middle and large opening at the front with a small one just at the back. And it's quite a nice emplacement. It's sort of guarding sort of any tanks that would have come straight off the beaches there. But we don't often see these. In fact, I don't know if I've actually ever seen one of these before anywhere else, certainly along the coast. But there we go, 6-pounder anti-tank gun emplacement. And just behind our anti-tank gun emplacement that was over there, hidden in the little bushes here, we've actually got yet another pillbox. I think a lot of people don't actually know about this one, or probably we can't see it very clearly, of course, from the beach, but it's exactly the same as the other ones we've shown you. 2 loopholes. Again, these don't appear to have been blocked up, so maybe, again, this one wasn't really used sort of towards the end of the sort of invasion crisis, but we still thought we'd take you for a little look. And it's nearly our last one we're going to show you. So we're going to get down to the actual sea now and show you our last feature along the coast. we've just come down onto the beach itself because this is actually where we've got more remains. Now, what we thought we were going to find here was in fact a pillbox, but on closer inspection, if we looked across this mangled sort of array of concrete and metal, and a lot of it is in fact the remains of the seawall, which has been replaced obviously a long time ago. But if we look really close amongst it, we can see quite large embrasures, far too large to have actually been a pillbox. So what we believe we've actually got here is a large anti-tank gun that was likely built into the side of the actual seawall itself. And there's not too much to see of it now. As you can see, it's been smashed around by the sea over the years. But if we just take a little look over here, we've actually got something else interesting to show you as part of it. So I'll get over there and we'll have a look. And just around here, we've got a little bit more concrete. But if you look ever so closely, you can actually see this is indeed a loopholed wall. No doubt it was likely part of the seawall itself. We don't believe it's got anything to do with the anti-tank gun that would have been here. But these look like they're quite clearly some sort of defensive loopholes that I guess they built them into the seawall for a little bit of added protection. But just down here, we've got other pieces of the structure. Again, some of it is just the seawall. Some of it would have been part of these defences. And down here, we've got some bricks. So this is clearly part of an actual defence. They wouldn't usually use bricks in sea defences, of course, but that's quite interesting to show you. And of course, no doubt, all of this concrete will be eventually completely lost into the sea, as well as apparently many anti-tank blocks that are, you can see them at low tide on the shoreline there. So we're leaving all the coastal crust defences down there on the beach, and we've actually decided to come up onto the cliffs because not only would they have had all those pillboxes and anti-tank guns, any particularly vulnerable parts of the coastline would have also been covered by a gun battery. And we do actually know that up here was built a gun battery, which would have had 6-inch Royal Naval guns. I think it was built in early sort of 1940, very rudimental concrete slab with concrete sort of sandbag emplacement like we sort of saw with that anti-tank gun. But this was only really operational for a few weeks before they decided to replace it with a much more substantial building. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about that when we get to the area where it used to be. And here it was. The large 6-inch gun emplacements were located just behind me where these more modern houses are. And it would have had 2 gun houses, it would have been connected by underground magazines, it would have had all the usual sort of structures that we associate with a large gun battery. And they didn't really care where they put it. In fact, they slapped it right in the middle of the road here, which upset a few of the residents, of course, because their road had to be closed off and they couldn't really get to their houses. And the town clerk actually complained to the army about this. And their response was actually to say, well, I know what we can do. We can evict you from your houses and we can use some of your homes for the war effort. And I think one of them, at least, was used as the officer's mess to that actual gun battery. And they did in fact use some of these guns, but only for sort of target practice, where they would have ships who were pulling targets behind, and they obviously would have been aiming at them. But they actually had to stop that because, of course, the explosions from these sort of large guns was actually blowing out some people's windows, which seems a bit of a shame, I suppose. But I think that's probably all I'm going to tell you about that now. So I think we're going to find Stu and we're going to say a couple more things before we say goodbye.
And here we are at the end of our little video in Gunton.
Yeah, and it's been nice having a little look at all these anti-invasion defences, but of course they were never actually used, were they? Because by 1943, or certainly long before that, you knew that the invasion was never going to happen. Operation Sea Lion was kind of cancelled, and that was that. And in fact, we later went on to learn that they were never actually going to invade the East Coast anyway, were they? They were actually going to go for the South Coast, but, well, I suppose it's better to be safe than sorry. But no, it's been really nice having a little look at what's left, and it's a great collection that they've actually got along here at Gunton, isn't it? But we hope you like joining us on this little look along the cliffs here, and if you have them, please give it a little like and a subscribe, and don't forget to check out our playlist of other military defences, including other ones along the Suffolk coast.
That's it. So as from Exploring with Emma Stew, we'll see you on our next adventure.
Thanks for watching as always. Bye-bye.
Bye.